All right, welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to be talking about ancient Persia. The Persian Empire sometimes is called the Achaemenid Empire, and this is going to be a distinct people group from the two main ones that we've talked about before. So already we've talked about the ancient Mesopotamians and the ancient Egyptians, and while they are definitely different civilizations, you can tell that from their aesthetic, you can tell that just from different social structures. They do very much feel like sister civilizations. They both have large polytheistic pantheons of gods. They're both river civilizations that sprang up on Tigris and Euphrates for Mesopotamia, and then the Nile River for the Egyptians. And so because of that, they have a lot of things in common, even as far as like their worship, their structures, their culture, everything like that. So if you remember at the very beginning of the first lecture, I had talked about prehistory and how before civilizations started to rise, there were pretty much two modes of being human. We had the hunter-gatherer cultures, and then we also had the agrarian cultures. Hunter-gatherer cultures would be nomadic. They would have to move around to wherever the blueberries or the mastodons could be found. Agrarian civilizations, they would settle down, right? So they had to be able to plant and irrigate and fertilize and harvest, and so they built long-term housing, and we talked about the shift from short-term temporary to long-term semi-permanent types of structures and even settlements. Well, there's been an important development that's been happening in the background, and it's been brought up even in our previous lectures on Mesopotamia and on Egypt. One of the most important developments in human history, which is the domestication of the horse. If you remember way back in the early Bronze Age, think of Sargon of Akkad and his chariots that were pulled with donkeys. Horses did exist, and they existed specifically up here in what we call the Pontic Steppe, kind of eastern Ukraine, southwestern Russia, this pink region on this map right here. But they were largely too small to do anything with, but they had been bred now to the size and utility of being able to ride, and that's why a little bit later you will see with the Assyrians or with the Egyptians that they were able to have chariots that could be pulled by horses instead of donkeys. And you also have people up here, sometimes they're called the Aryans, sometimes they're called the Proto-Indo-Europeans, as you can tell why by that map. And they have developed a third mode of being human. So they're not hunter-gatherers, they're not agrarians, they are instead what we call pastoral nomads. Pastoral, meaning that they are a shepherding people. They have pasture land that they would graze, and they would kind of move with the demand and the composition of the land. So as their flocks of herds and goats would consume the grass, they would move on to greener pastures. So they are also a nomadic people group, meaning that they would move around whenever was necessary. And these people have gone by various different names throughout history. They've organized into smaller tribes. Sometimes they're called the Scythians. But these Proto-Indo-European people, even though they start in what's called the Pontic Steppe, they move as far east as North India and as far west as well into the European continent or subcontinent, whatever you want to consider Europe. They are also the progenitors of what are called the Proto-Indo-European languages, or the Indo-European languages, the largest language family in the world. And it not only includes Germanic languages like English, German, Swedish, Dutch, Danish, but it also includes languages that are distinct as the Slavic, the Romantic languages, the Persian language, which will become evident why we're bringing this up here in today's lesson, as well as several of the North Indian languages, including most notably Hindustani. The Indo-European people were famous for kind of being hardy, being rough, kind of think of them as ancient cowboys. They were taught three things above all else: the ability to ride the horse, to shoot the bow, and to speak the truth. And they learned also to be able to shoot the bow while they're riding the horse. Children would be left with their mothers until they were about 5 years old, and that way, part of the reasoning behind that is the idea that the father wouldn't become too attached if the child died within the first 5 years. Infant mortality in the ancient world was brutal, and there was a lot higher opportunity for something bad to happen in the first 5 years of a child's life. But if they had survived past that point, then they might be able to grow and live a full life. That was at least the expectation. And so, yeah, these people were able to spread all the way around and to be the originators of different languages and different cultures, different people groups, as they kind of moved around a large portion of the globe. So it's into this civilization that we have two groups of people that are technically distinct from each other. They're called the Medes and the Persians. We had mentioned the Medes in one of our previous lectures on Babylon. The Chaldean Babylonians under Nabopolassar had hired the Medes to take down the Assyrian Empire, basically to move on the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrian Empire had already begun to destabilize after its last great monarch, Ashurbanipal. But then after they started to destabilize, the city of Babylon, which was already rebellious and seeking power of her own, the Babylonians paid the Medians and convinced the Medians to move in and to knock out the Assyrian seat of power in Nineveh. And so the Medians basically claimed everything that was kind of to the north and east of the Assyrian Empire, and the Babylonians, already being a river-dwelling civilization, they laid claim to the Assyrian Empire, except for Egypt. They did not lay claim to Egypt, but they did move further down on their western flank, further down from Judah and Jerusalem, all the way down into what would be considered Arabia. So the Medes and Persians were both descendants of people who would have been these pastoral nomads. Most notable of all of them, and in all of history, would be this guy up here at the top. His name is Cyrus the Great. He's called Cyrus the Great because when he comes to the throne of Persia, Persia is this small, more like a kingdom than anything else. It is literally just this region to the south of what today would be Iran, centered around Persagadai, and it is from this little kingdom that his dominion is expanded. He negotiates with the people of the Medes in order to get their allegiance switched over to him, and then he uses the combined might of the Medes and the Persians to sweep through Armenia and Lydia to the north and west, and then also Parthia, Bactria, Gandhara to the east. And this becomes the largest empire that the world had ever seen by this point. The Assyrians already had built their empire. The New Kingdom Egyptians had already built their empire. But Cyrus the Great was able to spread this to become the largest empire that the world had known up to that time. The Persians are distinct stylistically, aesthetically, and in a deeper and more foundational way than would have been the distinctions between the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians. Like I said, they have a lot in common, at least in their emphasis on large stoneworks projects and their polytheistic pantheons. The Persians are monotheistic, and we'll talk more about their religions, Zoroastrianism, in a little bit, but stylistically you can also tell that they're different. A lot of really interesting customs that they have. They have an obsession with creating these gardens that they call paradisas, which is where we get the word paradise from. They believed that building a garden was like one of their religious duties in order to be able to create beauty and order out of something that had been chaotic before. They're also largely known for celebrating birthdays. We have older attestations of birthdays being celebrated. In the book of Genesis, it even talks about an Egyptian pharaoh celebrating his birthday. But the Persians did this not only in their royalty, but everyone. So if you were royal, you would bake an entire ox, and you would use that as the meat for your birthday feast. But even if you were poor, you were expected to cook an entire animal. Now it might just be something a lot smaller like a pheasant or something like that, but you were expected to do that and to produce some kind of birthday feast. They also have this really interesting custom where in order to figure out if something was a good idea or not, you'd have a group of people come together to discuss it, and if everybody agreed that it was a good idea, then you would come back the next day and everyone would get drunk and discuss it. And if everybody still agreed that it was a good idea, then you could count on the fact that it is a good idea. There's a phrase in Latin, they say in vino veritas, which means in wine there is truth. And I think this has to do with the fact that maybe people, if they're fully about themselves, then they might exercise these social obligations to feel like, oh, I don't want to put this person's idea down. But then once their inhibitions are lowered, that they would be more likely to point out the stupidity or the inutility of a specific idea. So these are just some of the, cultural distinctives. Again, you can see kind of from the pictures here that aesthetically, stylistically, they do very much look different than either the Egyptians or the Mesopotamians had. So how did Cyrus build this empire? How did Cyrus take just the kingdom of Persia and turn it into something so vast and so large? The way that he would do this, or the kind of template for how this would happen, is let's say that you are the king of Babylon, and you rule over Babylon, and you acknowledge your pantheon of gods, and you even have your chief god Marduk, and you speak the Babylonian language, and you practice the Babylonian customs. Basically, the Persians would send an emissary or some ambassadors to your capital or to the seat of power of your kingdom, and they would ask for a simple offering. So the Persians would show up, and these ambassadors would ask for a gift of just a handful of dirt and a cup full of water. And this would be your symbol of submission to the king. You could remain the king of Babylon, but Cyrus the Great was going to be your king. You're the king. He is the king of kings, or they would call him the Shah on Shah. And what did submission look like? Well, the Persians were famous for ruling with a light touch. Basically, the idea is that every month you would make a contribution of both money and, if necessary, any of your soldiers to the Persian state, to the Persian Empire, to the Persian military. And so let's say that you specialized in heavy infantry or in your navy or in your cavalry. The idea is that you would make a contribution to the Persian Empire, and that any battles that they were looking to undertake, any wars that they were looking to wage, you would contribute to that. And you would also be rewarded with stability in your region. So if you say yes to this deal, you get to remain on the throne, worship your own god, speak your own language, practice your own customs. All that is expected of you is just this kind of monthly contribution of gold and, if necessary, troops. And it was kind of one of those ultimatums where they say, okay, we can either do this the easy way or the hard way. And if you do it the easy way, you get to continue to live a nice, cushy life. And honestly, your status or your, let's just say your standard of living might actually improve, because now if anybody picks on you, they don't just have to answer to your military. The entire weight of the Persian military, pulling troops from all over its empires, would come to your aid. But if you say no, as we see in the case of Babylon, they would march into your capital and they would just take it over by force. And because of this, the Persians had a very advanced military, because they were taking the cream of the crop from every different people group that they encountered. So they had their own base core military, but around that they would take the heavy infantrymen, the archers, the cavalry, the mounted archers, the chariots from these different people groups, and they would utilize them in their military. So they were definitely a force to be reckoned with. A lot of people's familiarity with Persia might also come from the Bible. There are a lot of stories in the Old Testament about Persia. Think of this as the chest and arms of silver from Daniel's vision. So in the book of Daniel, you have the handwriting on the wall, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Pharsin, which means you have been weighed in the balances and you've come up short. You've been found wanting. And so as a result of that, the Persians are going to come in this night and they're going to take over. And this is the story of the fall of the city of Babylon. So remember that the Babylonian Empire had gone into Judah and had taken the Jewish people captives, the Judeans captives, into Babylon. Well, when the Persians move in, we see that there are people. So, for example, Daniel himself, he was born in Judea. He, as a young person, is taken captive into Babylon, and he actually outlives the Babylonian Empire. Remember, the Babylonian Empire didn't last but about 74 years. So he outlives the Babylonian Empire, and he had been a trusted advisor to King Nebuchadnezzar of the Babylonians. And then when the Persians take over, they say, okay, well, this guy's a trusted advisor. Tell me what advice you want me to live by, or to guide me in my different pursuits. So this would be King Darius of the Persians. He's the one who is noted in the book of Daniel as using Daniel as one of his advisors. You have the story of Daniel and the lion's den. You also have King Xerxes, who's called Ahasuerus in the book of Esther, and he's the one who is kind of the I don't know if you call him the hero of the book of Esther. I guess that would be Esther herself, but he is the king that she has to approach and to implore for the favor of sparing her people. A couple other stories that are maybe less popular or less well known is that when the Persians, a couple other stories from the Bible, when the Persians actually take over Babylon, they see all of these Judeans that are living in the city of Babylon, in the region of Babylon, and it's almost like they ask them, hey, who are you guys? Where are you from? And the Jewish people say, well, we're exiles, we're captives. And the Persians say, oh, well, do you want to go home? And the Jewish people are like, yeah, we'd like to go home. And so Cyrus the Great actually sends them back. And not only does he send them back, but he is the one who finances the building or the rebuilding of their temple. The Babylonians had torn down the original temple that had been commissioned and built by Solomon, but he finances the creation of a second temple. And it's this second temple that would have lasted all the way from, the 500s BC all the way up till the life of Christ. So when we think of the story of Jesus going into the temple and chasing people out with whips and throwing over the tables and all that kind of stuff, the temple that Jesus did that in would have been the temple that was built under the financing of the Persians under Cyrus. And he not only finances the rebuilding of the temple, but he also finances the rebuilding of the wall around Jerusalem that the Babylonians had torn down. Cyrus commissions the rebuilding of, even though it doesn't happen until a later king's reign. So because of this, Cyrus gets great press in the Bible. The entire Persian people group gets great press in the Bible. In fact, Cyrus himself is referred to by the name of Messiah. He is the only Gentile who is given that title of being like a deliverer of God's people. We see that Cyrus is the one who definitely most of Persia's territorial gains are owed to. We see a lot of green on this map. That would be Persia going from just this small kingdom in southern Iran to now spreading all the way out into Anatolia, what would today be Turkey, and then spreading all the way east toward India. And then under his son Cambyses II, you have the conquest of Cyprus and also Egypt. And then under Darius, the borders are even pushed out further, most notably the Greeks. This would have been where some of the Greek city-states would have even come under the dominion of the Persian Empire. Not all of them, but certain ones of them. We'll talk a lot more about the Greeks later. So this is a very large empire. If you were to compare it to the United States, it's about the size of the contiguous United States. So think of somebody walking from one side of the Persian Empire to the other, from these Greek city-states in the northwest all the way to the border of India or into India in the southeast. That would be the equivalent of somebody walking from Florida to Oregon today. So very large, and a couple of the ways that they helped to facilitate the administration and the running of this empire would have been, one, they divided up the empire into several different what are called satrapies. So a satrap would be like a governor over one of these regions called a satrapy, and you can think of these as states, kind of like states are to the United States, as satrapies are to the Persian Empire. And it's kind of wild for me just looking at this map and seeing that on this map I have just single states that would be considered major players on the world stage. So Assyria, Babylon, Egypt. You think of Hindush all the way over there in the east. This is from a similar root of where we get the word India. Ionia over there in the west, the Ionian Greeks. And maybe some people who are not considered major players, but who are pretty notable. So you have the Yehud, those would be the Judeans, the Jewish people. You have Arabia, you have Armenia, you have Bactria. There are just a lot of people on this map who would have been considered major or even middling power players on the world stage, and they're relegated to the status of like a Montana or a Missouri or a Massachusetts or other states inside of this empire. Another way that they facilitated the administration and the running of the kingdom is by the building of roads, and they had specifically the royal road that linked to the capitals. I guess you would say that they have three capitals. They have Susa, Babylonia, and Persepolis, or Pasagadai, that are in the east, and they link this capital all the way to their western frontier with the Greeks with a royal road. One of the reasons they wanted the road to stretch out that way is because that's where they were having a lot of problems. We'll talk about the Ionian Revolt in a later lecture. but they also had this Pony Express type of postal service that would deliver messages, specifically messages from the king, down the royal road, and they would be able to transverse this a lot more quickly than they otherwise would. And so I know some of this might sound boring, like, okay, we have a postal service, we have the division of the territory up into different states or satrapies, but this type of efficiency is why Persia was able to rule for as long as it did over a relatively peaceful and stable empire. And so again, you can be the king of Egypt, you can be the king of Babylon or the king of India, you can still worship your gods, but I am the king of kings. I am the Shah on Shah. Whether it's Cyrus or Cambyses or Darius or Xerxes or any of the other kings of the Persians, they considered themselves to be the king over other kings, and they considered their one monotheistic god to be the god of gods. And so it's for this reason that we call ancient Persia a hegemon, or we say that they had hegemony in the Iron Age. So hegemony basically means that if you want something, you get it. If you decide to take something, then you are able. There is not much that you would really lack the ability to do. You are at least the single most powerful influence of power on the world stage. And in some cases, you might be considered the only major power on the world stage. So, like I said, you would be the king of kings, but also your god would be considered the god of gods. The Persian people had a monotheistic religion, but they believed that other people's gods were real, just that they were lesser gods and they were subservient gods to their one highest uncreated god, whose name was Ahura Mazda. So the religion of Zoroastrianism is named after Zoroaster, or Zarathustra, and he would be this guy over here on the left side. This would have been the prophet of Ahura Mazda. This was the person who let people know what he was like, what he expected of people. Interestingly enough, this reminds me a lot of Islam, and Islam used to be called Mohammedism. And so if you think of Islam being named after its chief prophet, so Islam means submission, but Muhammad is the name of the man who is the prophet of Islam, the highest prophet in Islam. Ahura Mazda had one chief prophet whose name was Zoroaster, and so that's why the religion is called Zoroastrianism. The Zoroastrians also believed that there was basically like an evil god who was also eternal and uncreated. So I guess Ahura Mazda is not the only eternal uncreated one, but this makes it a dual religion, or a dualistic religion. So in Christianity, Satan is a created being. Same thing in Islam. However, in Zoroastrianism, they believe that the good and upright, righteous god of light, Ahura Mazda, was eternal and had always existed in eternal light, and that the evil god of darkness and chaos, whose name is Angramanyu, that he had also eternally existed. And something interesting is that in Zoroastrianism, the idea is that Ahura Mazda, the good god, created the world in order to kind of bait or lure Angramanyu into this world. And the idea is that once the god of evil was lured into this world, Ahura Mazda could create humans, and those humans, through their good deeds and their true words, would be able to produce more light and to be able to destroy Angramanyu. So the idea is that before the creation of the world, you had pure light and pure darkness that were distinct from each other, but the world was created to be this mixture in order to lure in the darkness so that the light could overcome it. They considered water, fire, and earth to be sacred elements, and so because of that, whenever they disposed of a dead body, they did not bury the dead body in the earth, they did not cremate the body with fire, and they did not even give water burials, as far as like sending dead bodies out to sea because that would be considered tainting these holy sacred elements. Instead, what they would do is they would build these towers, these large towers, and on the top of those towers they would put the bodies of the dead, and the vultures or just other birds of prey, or I guess scavengers, would prey upon these bodies. The vultures and other birds would eat all of the flesh, and then once the bones had been picked clean, they could be taken down by special handlers, and they could be stored somewhere. But you have the prophet Zarathustra, who is the prophet of light and of truth, and then you have Angra Mainyu, who he's the god of lies. He is the god of deceit, of darkness, of chaos. And interestingly, this reminds me, or this for me, psychologically ties the religion of Zoroastrianism all the way back to those Proto-Indo-Europeans. Remember, they ride the horse, they shoot the bow, and they speak the truth. And truth telling was paramount. It was the highest virtue in Zoroastrianism. Another thing that they really looked down upon was taking on debt or owing people money. But specifically, the reason that they looked down upon that is because a man who is in debt, they would say, is more likely to lie, or he's more likely to bend the truth in order to alleviate himself of the suffering of his poverty or of his death. So that's Zoroastrianism. Again, has a claim of being one of the earliest monotheistic religions. And it really explains a lot. If you were to understand the main religion of a people, it really helps you to understand their psychology, even a lot of their decision-making when it comes to the kings and how they run their empire. We will talk more about the Persians later, whenever we talk about Greek history and the Greco-Persian Wars, but that's as much time as we're going to give them today. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a blessed day, and I hope to see you all next time.